The nice thing is if you don't talk, you won't show up on the thing anyways. The influence of Islam on Africa. And this right here just shows the parts where Islam is going to be predominant within Africa today. Madagascar is cool because it also has Hinduism in it, which is pretty rare to be outside of India. All right, so here just showing when that happens. We see the beginning obviously was going to be in North Africa, but then around the same kind of time frame, we're going to see it go to East Africa with all of the trade that we're having, the beginning of our Swahili states, and then West Africa by the 12th, 15th centuries, we're going to have it really growing. All right, so let's talk about the indigenous religions of Africa. So indigenous means it's from there, okay? And this is going to be an overgeneralization because there are literally hundreds of different belief systems that are indigenous to Africa. However, they're going to bear a lot of similarities, and a lot of this is because of the Bantu migrations, where the cultural aspects, they're going to get spread around, and then people are going to develop those ideas in there. So typically with religions indigenous to Africa, there'll often be one creator god, but then a pantheon of lesser gods. All right, and we saw this when we were in Kush last year. They had their lion god, which was their creator, but then they had other gods and goddesses as well. So we're going to see typically the indigenous religions of Africa will be polytheistic, but they will have a main god. Also, another thing that we're going to see typically, and once again, this is all broad overgeneralization. There are people that spend like their whole lives researching this kind of stuff and could tell you all sorts of details and intricacies, but this is not a graduate level class. You guys might be some of the smartest sixth graders and knowledgeable in the country, because you really are, because you learn about things that no other sixth graders learn about, which is amazing. I love it. But, you know, still, you don't need to know every little detail about every little thing. But we're going to see a respect for the ancestors, and typically this belief that ancestors could intervene in your life, that they could help you. For example, if Blake is walking home and then a lion jumps out to eat her, but then miraculously the lion just, hops on her and licks her face like a happy puppy to see the master. Like, she might think, my ancestors protected me. Yeah, pretty cool story, huh, Blake? I know, I'd be terrified. Or, Mamma Mia is going and is in a fire, like her house is burning, and then she manages to escape. She might thank her ancestors. Or even something as simple as, Aiden is taking a history test, and then he aces it. You might say, my ancestors helped me get this A. And one of the ways that we're going to see this manifest is people might use amulets or charms to go and invoke the spirits of their ancestors. So like I said, we're going to see that that these are going to be generalizations of the indigenous faiths of Africa. It's not, 100% every single one of them believes in this. And this is just a big generalization. But it's going to be interesting seeing how these meld with Islam. We're going to see that, primarily North Africa with Western Africa and East Africa is going to be today Islamic. And the rest of Africa, Central and South Africa, is going to be traditionally Christian. We're going to see some countries have splits between it. I had a fantastic conversation with one of your all's parents actually talking about the split and, knowing from the last name typically what faith and where they were. It was really cool. I enjoyed it a lot. So now onto Swahili. This is where Swahili is spoken today because we know it is a culture and a language. And of course, as we've discussed, it's a blend of African culture and Muslim culture. It's an Arabic word, and it means people of the coast. And what we had happen, and we discussed it very briefly yesterday, is this idea of how all of these cities formed along the coast because they were trading with Arabia and India. And these big, rich, powerful cities are created And from that constant interaction, we have this new language and new culture being developed. So like I've said a million times, it's a culture and a language. I do not know how to say anything in Swahili, so I'm sorry. Let's see here. Let's see, we've got how to say hello in Swahili here. Jumbo? Okay. Ah, it disappeared. Ah, phooey. I was trying to be slick. Interesting. Kadun Mumbo. Interesting. I was hoping I'd have like the standard like Google like how to say it, but oh well. Moving on. And our final slide for the day. We're going to actually look at how Islam changed the government and legal systems of West Africa. Now, we discussed that typically succession to the throne, meaning who the next king is. So, you know, when Simon's turn to be king, how it's going to go, and it was matrilineal, meaning not the king's son, but the king's nephew would be the next king. Because, of course, they believed the royal blood went through the woman, that the guy couldn't pass it on. So, just a quick review. The son of the king's sister would be the next king. But when Islam comes, we're going to see a more traditional route of going patrilineal, meaning it's, you know, Simon's daddy was king, and then Simon's king, and then his son Simon Jr. is king, and then Aiden becomes king because Simon Jr. adopted Aiden. I don't know. Weird, right? So we see the change happening with Islam, and that's going to be one of the big changes, just their succession line going patrilineal. Why that wind up changing, I don't know, because still women will have big prominence and importance within West African society. So I'm not quite sure why this change comes about, to be honest, but it does. Another thing, though, is that we had a lot of autonomy, meaning self-rule within different African kingdoms. So, for example, when we talked about Mali and Songhai in particular, but Ghana as well, they were emperors and they had kings under them. And those kings could basically rule their country as they saw fit. But then they would go and they'd pay their taxes and give their military service to the greater power, to Songhai, to Ghana, to Mali. But after Islam becomes more prominent, we see a more centralization of power, meaning it was the central government, meaning it was the king, the emperor, who had more of a role within the societies. And as we see that, instead of going, we saw, you know, the ruler of Ghana was named Ghana. You know, Mansa Musa. Mansa wasn't his first name. Mansa was his title. Mansa was the title. You know, but after we have Islam taking prominence, instead we're going to have Islamic titles such as Sultan or Emir as their rulers. You know, remember Sultan, that Turkish holder of power. Oh, I think it's the coolest title for a ruler. Although I like Caesar a lot too. But anyways, we're also going to see how laws are going to change as well. So one of the things we discussed in our Middle East unit was the idea of Sharia, which was Islamic law, and how there were social laws and there were religious laws within that. And we're going to see a lot of the traditional customary laws being replaced by Sharia law. My favorite example is there used to be something called the trial by wood. And the trial by wood, it's just awesome. So we have, who do I need to pick on? We have Sahil. Now, Sahil has been accused of a terrible, terrible crime. Blake had a delicious cookie plate, all of these great cookies, and Blake, she is dutifully eating her dinner because she knows after dinner she is able to have the treat of several cookies. And then Blake, after triumphantly finishing all of her peas and carrots, goes to the cookie plate and finds it empty. She follows the trail of crumbs and sees Sahil there, passed out on the couch with cookie crumbs all around him. So she brings it to Emperor Elijah and says, Sahil has eaten all my cookies. They don't have any proof, though, besides the crumbs around. So they say, well, we need to know if Sahil is guilty or innocent. So they go to Savona, who is going to go out and find a rotten piece of wood. I'm talking about, you guys have been in the woods, of course, and you've seen like a piece of wood that's like rotting away. It's got like fungus and all sorts of like bugs like crawling all over it, right? You know what I'm talking about? So she finds the gnarliest, grossest, rottenest piece of wood that you can find. And you may be thinking, okay, what does this have to do with Sahil? Well, the trial by wood, Savona is then going to put it in boiling water and make a delicious rotten wood tea. Oh, I love your facial expression there. So it makes a delicious rotten wood tea. And now Sahil has to drink said delicious rotten wood tea. And what's going to happen is, if Sahil barfs, then obviously the gods are saying he is guilty. All right? If Sahil does not barf, the gods are saying he's innocent. We've protected his tummy from this grossness. And clearly, Blake is telling a fib. So that's how they do it, trial by wood. But that ends after Islam goes. I can't wait till we get to Europe and we can talk about like the ordeals, because in Europe, under the church, they're going to have all sorts of crazy like things too. They're like, well, God will protect you or God will help you if you do this. And really, it's not how that typically works. But that is our notes for the day, my cherubs. I'm going to stop the recording here. Are there any questions